Well, I want to turn now to another story that I woke up to on a plane that was flying back to the U.S. It is this critical Supreme Court decision on the Affordable Care Act. This week, the court rejected a Trump-backed challenge to the health care law. The lawsuit was filed by Texas and other Republican states. Democrats on Capitol Hill celebrated the decision. Here's House Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Today's Supreme Court decision is a landmark victory for Democrats' work to defend protections for people with pre-existing conditions. We will never forget how Republican leaders embraced this monstrous way to rip away America's health care in the middle of a deadly pandemic.
Pete, I have to go to you here. The ACA has now survived 3 Supreme Court challenges. Do Republicans plan to challenge it again and again in court? And where might this go?
Well, I think there are going to be more challenges to the Affordable Care Act, but not the overall architecture, not its survival, not whether it should live or die. There may be attacks on specific provisions, but they're 0 for 3, and this last time the court's 3 liberals were joined by 4 of the court's conservatives. Chief Justice John Roberts, who of course voted to uphold it twice before, Clarence Thomas, who voted not to uphold it twice before, Amy Coney Barrett, who Democrats said was put on the court to kill Obamacare, and Brett Kavanaugh. So the court basically made this decision, although it said Texas and the red states didn't have the legal standing to sue because they couldn't show how a non-enforceable part, the individual mandate, could harm them if it didn't do anything. They also made it very hard for anyone else to make that same claim. So, yes, there are going to probably be more challenges on certain parts of it, but not on the overall bill itself, the act itself.
And as you noted, 2 of former President Trump's controversial Supreme Court justices nominees, Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett, they both voted with the majority opinion here. Was that surprising? And what does that say, if at all, about future decisions?
I have to say the outcome wasn't surprising because I think most people thought this Texas lawsuit was going to go over like a lead balloon in the Supreme Court, but for a different reason. Remember, the Texas states had said the problem is the individual mandate's unconstitutional, and if you take that out, the whole law has to fail. And that seemed to be a complete non-starter when the case was argued before the Supreme Court. So I think many of us thought, okay, the court's going to say, well, even if it's unconstitutional, the rest of the law can survive. Instead, they decided a question that was much earlier in the process. Did these states have the right to get into the courthouse door in the first place? What does it say about the court? It says this, and another decision the court made on religious freedom says that what we have now is a Supreme Court that's divided 3-3-3. 3 liberals, 3 moderate conservatives, the Chief, Kavanaugh, and Barrett, and then 3 of the most conservative justices, Thomas, Gorsuch, and Alito. And what we really are seeing now, at least in the decisions leading up to the last couple of weeks of the term, we have 15 cases left, is a real division among the conservatives. This has not turned out to be the solid conservative juggernaut that many people were expecting, hoping for, or fearing.
3-3-3. I think we should all be thinking about the Supreme Court in that way. Garrett, I want to come to you. How is this impacting things on Capitol Hill? You see Democrats sort of levitating. They're so happy. But I also wonder, with 600,000 Americans dead from COVID, how are they thinking about the way forward?
Democrats have 2 priorities now. They want to try to expand coverage, and they're not in agreement on the best way to do that. There's some who think the best way to do that is to try to lower the eligibility age for Medicare, possibly as a step eventually towards Medicare for all, a goal of many progressives. There are some who'd like to see the public option be put in place, which was originally debated as part of Obamacare and left on the cutting room floor, and which Joe Biden ran on, but is a much more complicated legislative feat and probably impossible to do in a 50-50 Senate. The lower hanging fruit would be to try to find a way to reduce the cost of prescription drugs. That's something that, at least in theory, Republicans agree with them on. But again, in a 50-50 Senate with almost no margin for error in the House either, that's more complicated than Democrats would like it to be too. And I think if we've learned anything about the politics of healthcare over the last couple of years and all of these challenges to the Affordable Care Act, people want to like what they have. They want to defend what they have, even if it's a thing they didn't like before. But once you start tinkering with people's health care, you risk that public backlash. And so Democrats are going to tread cautiously here.
And I saw you nodding your head. I want you to jump in here with the White House perspective of this.
Well, I mean, obviously the White House is pleased that the ACA has survived again. I mean, as Pete was alluding to, this was the weakest of the three challenges that the law survived, and the fact that it cannot be overstated how much Trump affected the Supreme Court. I mean, it is highly unusual to be able to name three justices in a single presidential term. So everyone was waiting to see how the court would function, this radically different court would function. And the answer in these two very consequential cases, is a surprise, as as Pete laid out very expertly there. The White House was waiting to see that too. They don't know. These are not their people. They do not understand exactly how this is going to play out, and I imagine they are pleased by the result.
And meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, at least 21 senators have expressed their support for a new bipartisan infrastructure proposal. That includes 11 Republicans. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell says he is open to the deal if it doesn't reverse Trump-era tax cuts.
Put me down as listening and hopeful that somehow, some way, we'll be able to move forward with an infrastructure bill.
Garrett, I want to come back to you. Some White House sources tell me that a bipartisan deal is now more likely, there's more of a chance of it now that President Biden, or I should say since before President Biden left. What do you make of that, and what's the latest on infrastructure?
Well, look, I think it wouldn't surprise anyone at this table, and Kaitlan as well, that the president is extremely eager to come up with a bipartisan deal if there is one to be had here. And the fact that there are so many Republicans who are in play on this suggests that it's possible. But I'm glad you called it a proposal and not a bill, because right now we don't know exactly what this will cost, exactly how it would be paid for. The White House has already thrown out some of the ideas that Republicans had suggested as a way to pay for this. And for every Republican you bring on, this week was interesting because progressives also found their voice on saying, wait, we had other priorities too, Mr. President, like climate, like the care economy that we wanted to see a part of too. So don't go too far the other direction and set our priorities aside. Are we closer to a bipartisan deal than we were before the president left? Absolutely. But are we close in any real term to something being put on paper and passed through two houses of Congress? Not yet.
Kaitlan, we only have 10 seconds left, but I want to just come to you. What are you hearing about whether the White House is going to back this deal?
I think it's cautious optimism right now. President Biden has said that Ron Klain, his chief of staff who stayed back, was part of those negotiations, has been briefed on it, is kept abreast of it, and it feels like there is potentially some room there. But as President Biden said today, he is not actually going to look at that proposal, which Garrett noted is not final, until Monday. So really, we don't know yet.
And that's all the time we have tonight. Thank you to Kaitlan, Pete, and Garrett for sharing your reporting. And thank you for joining us. And before we go on this very first Juneteenth federal holiday, some touching news. This week, New York City announced that it will name a park after former Washington Week moderator Gwen Ifill. The park is located in Gwen's native borough of Queens, New York. Gwen was a mentor to me, and it is amazing and touching to see her legacy continuing to be honored.